We continue our discussion with Bishop Dave Dolan of New Life, Sullivan, Illinois. If you just Google it, you'll find him. He's all over there. What great messages, what great teaching, and great influence that he has mentoring. He also serves a great network in the Midwest of ministers who come together every month to learn everything from nuts and bolts of how to do corporations and ministry and how to manage your churches and your organizations. I am always amazed, Bishop Dave, at how you influence other men. But there is a question that I have that I like to ask of my friends because we all want to know. The issue is that we all have to show ourselves approved unto God.
Right.
So my question is, how do you study for that presentation of your dream, that presentation of your organization, that presentation of your church, or that presentation of your preaching ministry or teaching ministry? How do you study? How do you how do you find from God which way you're going to go to present your focus?
To define that and answer that, I have to retreat and go back historically to a point where a man of God, primarily Bishop Holley, who's sitting next to me, taught me how to hear the voice of God. What kind of value do you place upon that? It's saved my life. It's helped me move into an arena and a dimension to become a greater, more articulate, potent communicator. So when I get ready to look at the year that's coming up, and this becomes a daily exercise for me in allowing God to channel to me His thoughts, it releases God's creative ability as I begin to write, and through that process, the Lord will give me a word, a phrase, a substance about the direction of our particular church or something that needs to be addressed. As I begin to dissect that biblically, for example, when the Lord spoke to me to simply teach the lesson of David and Goliath, the creative part that God releases, because we are visual people, I put together what I call a story time. We have background music, smoke, lights. We bring in a gentleman on drywall stilts. He becomes our 8-foot tall giant. And we bring David in. He's excited. He's learned to hear from God, out tending his father's sheep, even though he was rejected from being a part of when the prophet came looking for a king. David was faithful in that. And so as we study and as we hear the voice of God, God will realign you. He will readjust anything that's happening in your life if you learn to hear His voice, if you learn to track that and then begin to appropriate the biblical foundation that you have as ministers of the gospel from just reading. And so when we presented it, there were elements of that story that came to us that we discovered as I bring it to my creative team, that they can help me package this so that we do the most excellent job paying attention to the details so that God's people can walk away with the greatest impact of the word in their life that will transition, change, transform their lives that week. And the final analysis of that whole presentation, which God gave me in prayer and study, we discovered historically that David took Goliath's head and buried it outside of Jerusalem on a hill that we know as Golgotha. And through listening to the voice of God and studying and reading, we challenged every person, take your giant to the foot of the cross. And so that's how I study, and that's how I appropriate those things. Sometimes God will give us a word for a series for 6 to 8 weeks. I like to do series because it keeps people in a flow. And it's a result of hearing the voice of God and God placing me in a particular artery and vein of information that not only impacts me, but my family and the church. And so out of that, we see growth, healing, salvations, etc.
Now let's bring that, and in fact, if you want to see that particular session, you can look on Independent Christian Churches International Facebook, and it was actually carried live on there last week, I think, on the 4th. But you could go back and look at that. what I'm also interested in is not only your local, so you find a word from the Lord, biblical stories back it up, you get a creative team together to work and help you bring this, but what if you're going to go speak to city council? What if you're going, I know you're very active in your city, and what if you're going to speak, they're asking you right now to help the planning, the long-range planning of the community. What focus do you put on hearing the voice of God and studying what you are to say before you get before men in the public arena?
I will follow the same pattern, except I have to dissect that in the arena of business. And some of the things that happen in the church in terms of cycles, in terms of strategically positioning people in the church, work also in a business and in our community. Our community may not be unique, but there are some things about all of our communities that are. We're looking to see how do we develop the downtown, how do we bring in new businesses, and I believe that there are some unique things that God will share with me that I can give to them as kingdom principles without preaching to them, because I've already been.
You're not the rebuking prophet coming to the city. You're coming with answers that you heard from the Lord, and you have spent time studying it out, just like you would a public story time.
And we did that in a session about 3 years ago, and one of the city council members asked me why I was not more involved. And we shared with them that what we do and whatever plan we have to act upon, which is a biblical concept. James said faith without corresponding actions is dead. And so I want to help move them in kingdom principles, and if I can get them to honor the principles of the kingdom, even if they don't understand the biblical aspect of it, God will bless our city and bring increase, and we'll accomplish great things, and we'll give God all the glory.
You know, I thank you very much for bringing that forth, but when we do what we are doing, and of course here in the ICCI, we not only pastor pastors. As a bishop, you pastor organizations. And I'm thinking of one of the greats in central Illinois is a man that has a wonderful basketball ministry, taking the young people of the community through basketball. I mean, big tournaments and all that. What is his name? I'm sorry, forgive me.
Cherry.
Anthony Cherry. And I watched him go from a dream that he was already working on to a successful, respected organization with the proper documents and the proper things. And people think that, well, you went to school of business to learn this. No, we went to the school of God, because we were not trained in those arenas. And I was really impressed to hear you say that before you go publicly to present what your views are, you study it and you hear from God what is the focus of how we can lead them long range out of this situation.
We have to know how to present what we believe are spiritual truths in a secular arena, in a business arena, because the principles they will understand. They won't necessarily be concerned where it came from if it's presented accurately and correctly and with passion.
Now, I know you, and I know things don't just happen. And I know that you are spirit-led and God-focused on everything that you do. And for years, you have been giving to your city something on Halloween that at first they kind of held you. Tell us a little bit about how that God put that in your heart to present an opposing side. And then over the years, how it's progressed.
We wanted to do something in the Halloween season that would be a blessing to the community, but remove the elements of Halloween that we're not comfortable with. So we created an environment called Hullabaloo. We take up the whole square. We raise the money from local businesses, and they come in and create an atmosphere. Everything is free. Vendors are there. We had over 3,000 last year. And this last week, the city manager came to me and said, how can we help you financially?
Well, and that goes to say that those of you that are listening to us today, when you talk about how do you study, we study everything that we're focusing on in our organizations and our drives and everything that we do. Whether you are church-centered, now he says we can't just be on the church property, because many people have trunk fest and things and we're, as an alternative. But you actually took this to the city. And, I love your giant flag you have at the 4th of July. I mean, but it's not just ideas.
Right.
It's a God idea.
Yeah.
And then it's studied just like it is done, everything we do, studied out to make it happen. Before we go today, tell us about what you do on 4th of July, or you do it, or when does the big flag come out?
The 4th of July, we have a 40 by 60 flag that we carry. And then we have a trailer that has a scene from Iwo Jima. We're playing loud American music. People stand, they take that picture and put it in the paper all over. And it's very simplistic, but it's very powerful. It was a God idea, and God's given us favor through that.
You know, I see every year. I see in your communications, you're asking people to come and walk with the flag, and people in the church, that becomes their part of the parade.
Yeah.
But it really, you found a way to put your agenda first and foremost, no matter who's in their parade.
That's right.
How can you ignore a 40 by 60
It's
flag?
awesome.
That the church members are coming down. Well, one last thing today in this segment, we have several of the things. Your extended studies, ministers you follow, people you watch for.
Right.
Can you give us some clues, some things you look at in the modern day society?
I look for pastors to connect with or listen to that are doing 10 to 100 times more than myself. I do not want to be the biggest fish in the pond. I want to be challenged. I want to walk away going, I have to raise the level of my intensity and pursuit of God, because I want to become a greater vehicle and conduit for the kingdom and for the glory of God.
You know, if you're in Central Illinois, once a month, ICCI Midwest is the group that he has there that meet. And they come from everywhere. They come to a city like Decatur, and they meet in a hotel or a local church or something. It's just organizations and ministers, not just fivefold ministers, also great organizations that do things like the basketball guy, and like Anthony Cherry, and there's several others. But the fact is that you give them and equip them, and you bring your team, and you work with them, and he can work with you, and he can help you, and we appreciate your sacrifice for that, and I appreciate your diligence to not only get an idea, but to flesh it out and get it all planned out perfectly so that it makes the maximum impact for the kingdom of God. God bless you. We'll see you next time.